on Foreign Affairs. Leslie Shedd, thanks so much for making the time to speak to us today. I mean, where to begin with all of this, because it's moving so quickly at the moment. Just give us a sense, if you can, on the US reaction in the days now that have passed from that Friday evening event in the Oval Office, and how much support for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance's attack on Zelenskyy the Trump administration seems to have.
I would say the very first kind of response that anybody had was shock. I mean, I watched it with my mouth agape. You know, I have been a part of many closed door bilateral meetings with leaders all over the world, and those kinds of conversations sometimes do happen, but never really in front of a television camera. So the initial was just shock, and then after that was grave concern about what happens next for Ukraine, what this means for Europe, and what this means in general for global security. You know, I think with regards to what people think about President Trump here, you know, look, President Zelenskyy was told repeatedly by his biggest allies in Congress and in the United States that he needed to come here, he needed to sign this deal, and that he needed to say thank you, and that this was going to help reset the relationship with President Trump. It was going to help him and help his country. And instead, he took the bait in that meeting. And I genuinely wish he would not have done that. I wish that we could have stopped that from happening. But, you know, as Secretary of State Rubio said this morning, as well as Ambassador Mandelson said this morning, now is the time for a reset. And I'm really hopeful that can happen.
Yeah, there was talk as well on the morning shows as well that it was not an ambush, it wasn't a setup. But Mike Waltz, the National Security Director, has said that it was just clear that Zelenskyy wasn't quite ready to have that conversation. I mean,
he feels very passionate. I mean,
100%.
Right. I mean, I understand that, right? I mean, his people are being slaughtered every day, and he is desperately trying to keep his country still existing. I mean, of course, he is very passionate about that. But when it comes to diplomacy, sometimes you just kind of have to bite the bullet and say what you're supposed to and get through. This mineral deal would have been a great thing for his country. And I think it still is possible. I want to be very clear. I definitely think it still is possible. But the President Trump doesn't see foreign policy in the same way that, you know, somebody like my former boss, Chairman McCall, necessarily does. He sees things very transactionally, and this would have been a good way to get them back on the right footing.
Leslie, not to over-litigate again what happened on Friday, because I think many people want to kind of move on from what we all had to witness in the Oval Office. But I guess Zelenskyy knew what had been said by J.D. Vance in the past about the withdrawal of support. You know, he knows what Donald Trump has said in the past about US support for Ukraine. And there is this threat now in the past day or so that support could withdraw even further. Are we getting closer to that? Is that something that the president, you know, is still sort of hanging over everyone's heads, that the US could seek to withdraw even further and not supply any more arms to Ukraine?
I sincerely hope not, but honestly, I am afraid of that right now. Right now, the President Trump is still allowing weapons to come through. He is still allowing, us to continue to send the arms over to Ukraine. And those weapons are incredibly critical to Ukraine's defense. And I am concerned about whether or not that will continue.
What support is there in Congress for that to continue? Because that's the other side of this. The executive branch, of course, has its own sort of path to plough on this. But in terms of congressional support, where are we with Ukraine at the moment? Because I have seen the reports from Lindsey Graham, who said exactly what you said in the first answer, that, Zelenskyy really needed to come to the Oval Office, come to the White House and meet these two people on the level and listen to what they said and behave humbly.
So, look, I want to make it very clear. There is still very strong bipartisan, bicameral support in the United States Congress for Ukraine, for supplying weapons to Ukraine. There is still a very strong bipartisan, bicameral caucus of members of Congress who absolutely believe that Vladimir Putin was the aggressor, that he cannot be trusted, and that Ukraine is a democracy that we need to be helping. But the meeting did not make that easy for those people. This is this is not a helpful tool. And I think what you saw with Lindsey Graham was a frustration. He felt like, look, I'd set you up with this. I helped you. I have put my own political capital on the line. I've used my political capital, not just with my voters back home, some of whom don't necessarily support this, but also with President Trump, and sat down and defended you and said how important this was. And they feel like it was blown because he couldn't keep his temper. And again, I want to be clear. I 100% understand why he was so frustrated. I absolutely understand why he's so passionate about this, but it just wasn't helpful.
Will an apology make all the difference?
Yes, absolutely. And I think too that one of the things that I feel like has been kind of lost in all of this is that President Zelensky, English is not his first language. I have been in foreign countries and met with people, and there are certain idioms that people use and catchphrases that, when translated, don't sound that great, right? And I think that he can sit down and explain, look, this whole situation, I was lost in translation. English is not my first language. And I am sorry that I allowed this situation to devolve. I am sorry across on both sides, that both sides allowed tensions to boil over. And I want to reset. And I think that would make all the difference in the world.
I wonder if Mr. Trump and Mr. Vance would like to apologise as well, but I suppose that remains to be seen.
Yes.
Sure. It does indeed. All right, Leslie Shedd, really do appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.